My witty wife became curious about another man, as a result of which I completely betrayed him. She even let my most precious thing be in the hands of another man. Everything was full of subtle hints and disagreements. Sally and I had been married for 10 years when we met. It all started according to all the rules, but something has changed. We both started to grow, as they say, and for me it meant settling down and looking forward to the future, or at least that's what I thought. The bar scene no longer brought me pleasure. Loud music and drunks stopped being funny. The music is so loud that I couldn't really communicate with people, and it became important for me to connect with them. Drunks were just drunks. When I stopped drinking more than a couple of drinks in the evening, all the nonsense that drunks said and did stopped being funny and smart, and became just stupid and pointless. It seemed to me that Sally was making concessions with me. She seemed as interested in walking, quiet evenings at home, and lovemaking as I was. We stopped going to bars and started doing things together. She seemed to agree with me that quiet and less noisy entertainment was at least as satisfying. God knows my head hurt a lot less the next morning. Well, that's what I thought until her work trips started happening more often. She had a job at a cosmetics company, and she regularly visited the firm's clients to promote and showcase new and improved products. The frequency of work trips has increased from once every 3 to 4 months to the last few months. I realized that Sally flies somewhere every 3 weeks. When I thought about it, I noticed that the pattern of her trips had changed too. At first, Sally went to the airport in the morning and arrived at her destination before lunch. Sally met with the management of the company she visited at lunch. She spent the whole day answering questions and promoting the benefits of new and improved products. The next day, she held demonstrations in leading boutiques and department stores, usually lasting until noon. Sometimes Sally would give evening performances, but then she would come home that night. She always called me and asked me to meet her at the terminal, regardless of the time she arrived. Now she flew in the evening before the trip, then met and held meetings and demonstrations for the next 2 days, presumably the same as before, but returned home in the morning or early afternoon after her performance. At first, she had a short 2-day trip. She arrived one morning, stayed one night, and left the next day after lunch. Now she spent 3 nights before returning on the third morning, and it seems she didn't want me to meet her on arrival. According to Sally, she knew that I wouldn't want to take a vacation to pick her up on a regular basis. Now you probably think that I suspect that our sex life is suffering, but that's not really the case. In fact, the nights when she returned from one of her trips became some of the hottest sessions, and that was one of the things that got me thinking. She became inventive in some of these evenings. Some of these little features became part of our regular love. What really gave me food for thought a couple of months ago was that I realized she wasn't available when I called her in the evening. She always called me right after our usual lunch, but wouldn't answer the phone if I tried to contact her later, say at 9 o'clock or 10:30. In one case, I called after midnight and couldn't get through. She said she was very tired after flying and long days of working with clients and demonstrations. According to Sally, she just didn't answer the phone. If I left a message, she would call me at work the next morning, usually around 8:15, right after I arrived at my desk. The need for rest after Lee's arrival is the reason why she leaves the day before the trip. She told me that she didn't want to deal with late-night flights after a long and hard day of work and demonstrations in front of the public. It all made sense, especially if I assumed she had little interest in home life with me. It was very unpleasant for me because of the doubts I had, but I couldn't help but wonder what was going on those 3 nights when she wasn't there and couldn't be contacted. I took great care of her, and other than that, Sally gave me no reason to suspect that she didn't love me. But these doubts were gradually eating away at me. I was jealous and let it affect our relationship, whether she understood it or not. Finally, I decided that I needed to satisfy my doubts, get rid of this torment, so to speak. However, I couldn't reveal my doubts to Sally. If they were baseless, she would be angry at me for questioning her. If there was some truth to them, she would be scared. Either way, the wonders would still exist, and the only change would be that my wife would be upset with me. It felt necessary for me to confirm that my fears were unfounded, but I couldn't let her know what I was doing. So, when her upcoming trip was scheduled, I arranged to take a few days off with my boss. Then, I informed Sally that I needed to visit one of our suppliers on the days she would be away. I promised to call her at her hotel during our usual talk time, but mentioned that I might not be available as I would likely be staying overnight and wouldn't be home to receive her call. Sally's flight to Phoenix was scheduled for late afternoon. I booked a morning flight and arrived at the hotel where she always stayed well before her. After changing into unrecognizable clothes, I drove my rental car back to the airport. As she walked off the airplane, I positioned myself near the gate, wearing a nondescript outfit and a conspicuous baseball cap, engrossed in reading the National Enquirer. A tall, distinguished man, whom I had met at a company banquet years ago, approached Sally with an affectionate hug. It was the owner of the local distributor for the cosmetics line that Sally was supposed to demonstrate. Allowing them to proceed ahead, I made my way to the baggage claim area, observing from a distance as they retrieved my wife's suitcase. I changed my shirt, put on a sport coat, and discreetly followed them. As soon as Sally checked into the hotel and received her key, they both entered the elevator. The man seemed tired, his hair disheveled and unwilling to fall into place. Despite his weariness, he appeared thrilled to be with Sally. The elevator doors closed with only the two of them and another couple. I closely monitored the floor numbers, realizing that Sally's room was either on the 4th or 15th floor when the elevators stop on those levels. Considering Sally's preference for a room with a view, I guessed that hers would be on the 15th floor. 45 minutes later, they were still up there, causing me to anxiously chew on my knuckles. However, I reminded myself that this was a business trip, and it wasn't implausible for them to be discussing details of Sally's upcoming performances. Glancing at the time, I noticed that it was already 6:15 back home, making it too late for our usual evening phone call. I dialed the hotel from a payphone, requesting to speak with my wife. The phone rang incessantly until the operator informed me that there was no answer. My stomach churned with anxiety as I hung up the phone. I walked over to a nearby gift shop, picked up a book on weight loss and self-improvement along with a local newspaper, and settled in a spot where I could monitor the elevators. Almost 3 hours later, the man who had accompanied Sally finally appeared, looking considerably more presentable than when he had met her flight. He moved confidently through the lobby, his hair perfectly styled and slightly damp. He certainly didn't resemble someone who had spent the past 4 hours discussing business matters. Urging myself not to jump to conclusions, I discarded the red self-help book in a nearby trash can and headed to the payphones to make another call. Once again, there was no answer from Sally's room. Disheartened but determined, I returned to my own room, trying to prepare myself for sleep. However, I couldn't recall if I managed to rest at all that night. It felt as though I spent the entire night tossing and turning, fixating on the ceiling, or staring out the window. After taking a shower the next morning, I used washable hair color to alter my appearance and dressed in a manner that my wife wouldn't associate with her husband. Returning to the lobby, I utilized the payphone again to call Sally's room, but there was still no response. I left a message stating that I had attempted to reach her and would be out of the office for the day. I assured her that I would call after I had dinner. Knowing that her day would be consumed by genuine work, rather than any questionable activities, I spent the day exploring the city. In the afternoon, I positioned myself in the lobby once more as Sally returned. She entered the elevator alone, and I patiently waited. After allowing her some time to settle in, I moved to the payphones once again and dialed her room. To my relief, she answered almost immediately, sounding slightly out of breath. After exchanging declarations of love, Sally informed me that she had just arrived in her room, exhausted from a demanding day. We discussed our respective days, mine filled with fictional events. She mentioned her weariness and her plan to have a quiet dinner at the hotel before possibly reading and going to bed. But whether she read or not, she was going to bed early as she had a hard day of demonstrations tomorrow. I told her I had tried to call her the day before. Sally explained that she was met at the airport by the man who owned the firm distributing their products in the Phoenix area. They had gone directly to his office, and she had not checked into the hotel until quite late. She warned me she might not be back to the hotel until late hour time tomorrow, and not to be disappointed if she wasn't in when I called tomorrow evening. Feeling unsettled after that lie, I sank into my seat in the lobby to read the paper before going in to eat. My mood was totally spoiled when the elevator opened 45 minutes later, and Sally stepped out of it on the arm of a man I had never seen before. They were chatting and joking, flirting pretty openly, and he gave her a very familiar pat on the ass just as they turned away from me and headed for the parking garage. My rental car was parked on the one-way street in front of the hotel. Hurrying out to the car, I climbed behind the wheel and waited. From where I was sitting, I could see the exit to the hotel parking garage. 5 minutes later, I recognized Sally and her escort as they drove out. Pulling carefully out behind them, I followed them to a steakhouse outside the city. Parking, I waited while they ate dinner. That was the first time I realized I had not really expected to find her running around, since I had made no preparation for eating while on stakeout. I knew I was pretty depressed when I found being on stakeout at a steakhouse moderately funny. It was an hour and a half wait before the two came out. They were giggling and loud, pretty obvious to me that my lovely wife had been downing a few drinks with her meal. My evening just went downhill from then on. They drove to a loud bar. After giving them 10 minutes to get settled, I followed them inside, where I moved to the bar, sitting where I could see the room. They weren't hard to spot, being probably the loudest couple in the place. Sally and her date danced, drank openly, necked, and acted like the life of the party. Everyone seated near them was pulled into their fun, and it looked like one big party. One thing was obvious: my wife was well acquainted with her date. Sitting quietly at the bar, I tried to nurse my drink. To my utter astonishment, a very attractive woman sat down and struck up a conversation with me. She was funny and nice, but something didn't quite fit. Somehow I picked up that she was working for the bar, checking out potential troublemakers. I didn't fit in with the hard-drinking clientele, and it was her job to stop a scene before it started. She finally scoped me out as a lonely man trying to recover from a broken heart. One of the things she tried to do to cheer me up was point out the happiest couple in the room, my wife and her date. She told me the woman had been in here a few times alone, but just 3 weeks before, Randy, the guy she was with, had been the one taking her home. She had seemed pretty unhappy and lonesome herself back then, but just look at them now. I thanked her for her help, told her I felt better, and that I'd best go home and give myself a good night's sleep. Now she had helped a lot. I drove back to the hotel, changed clothes again, and decided to go get a cup of coffee at the hotel coffee shop. I happened to be sitting where I could see the elevator banks. About 15 minutes after I sat down, I saw Sally and her date step into the elevator on the way up to the 15th floor. Before the doors shut, she had her arms around him, and the last I saw of my wife that night, she was engaged in one of the most passionate kisses I had ever seen. When the doors shut, the crew behind the counter and the lobby were snickering to each other about the display. There was serious question whether they were still vertical by the time they reached the 15th floor. I guessed Sally wanted to show him the view. Now that I knew her date's car, I headed to the parking garage and found it easily enough. Shining my keychain flashlight in the windows, I spotted a Manila business envelope mailed to Randy Hansen. Now I knew her date's name, for what good that did me. Just for it, I headed back to the payphones to look in a Phoenix area telephone book. Sure enough, Mr. Randy Hansen was listed. The listing was for Randy and Barbara Hansen. Looking at my watch, I saw it was after 11, but dialed the number anyway. It took 7 rings, but a woman finally answered. I asked her if I could talk to Randy. She told me he was out whining and dining some mucka timmick from one of his accounts, and she didn't expect him back until the wee hours of the morning. I apologized and told her I had a problem, but hadn't realized how late it was, telling her I would catch him in the morning. I hung up. Now I was pretty steamed and dialed Sally's Ruin house phone. It rang a dozen times before I hung up. Going up to my secluded room, I waited another 20 minutes and called her again, letting her ring. After waiting for half an hour, I dialed her number again and let it ring again. Then I waited another half hour before dialing again. Around the 12th ring, Sally picked up the phone, sounding slightly drunk. Speaking through a towel attached to the phone and trying to sound intoxicated, I made an obscene offer. Sally screamed, and I heard the phone being grabbed from her. An angry male voice rang out on the line, warning me to leave the lady alone, otherwise he would write to me. I stopped and took the final step. I'm sorry, Randy, I didn't realize you were the one with Sally tonight. Give her my regards. I'll talk to her later, and I hung up and went to bed. It goes without saying that I can't sleep properly that night either. Early the next morning, I decided that there was nothing else to do in Phoenix. I left early, probably while my wife was still asleep. After going to the airport, I boarded the first plane flying in my direction, and that evening I was home by 13:00. I didn't try to call Sally. There was nothing to gain if she went out, and if she was at home, then the fact that I didn't call gave her something to think about. To my surprise, I woke up early from a restless sleep, from a taxi stopping at our entrance, and from the fact that Sally heavily carried her bag inside. I met her in the living room when she was hanging up her coat. She stood looking at me for a moment, looking very tired and upset, then rushed to me, hugging me. I gave her a formal hug, hiding my face in her neck so she couldn't kiss me. Dear God, this is really a change of plan. Did your boyfriend kick you out? I asked as we walked away from each other, trying to sound at least half joking. My boyfriend lives here, she replied, squeezing me tighter. How can I persuade him to come to my bed? You must be tired, Sally. Why don't you try to get some sleep? I told her, saying that I had just got up to make breakfast. You want to eat something before you go to bed? You are not expected at work until that day, so you can take the opportunity to relax. I've noticed that these business trips are very tiring for you. Sally looked at me carefully. No, thank you, dear, but I can have a cup of tea while you eat. What happened? You seem pretty distracted. I completely lost my appetite. I decided that I'd better eat something now, because given my life, I might lose my appetite later, and if I wait for my appetite to return, I might starve to death. I put the kettle on the fire and made fried eggs with sausages and toast. While I was waiting for the sausages to fry, I poured orange juice for Sally and for myself. Sally sipped her tea in silence while I ate. I knew we were going to talk soon, but I didn't want to do it at all. After I was able to eat the tasteless food, I leaned back and looked at my wife. She was still one of the most attractive women I've ever met, smart and witty. It was a time when I missed smoking. Neither of us really wanted to start a conversation, and having a cigarette or, better, a pipe would be very comforting right now. Finally, I said, "We need to talk, Sally. Let's go into the living room and get comfortable, or better yet, go take a shower and wash off the fatigue from the road. Then come back when you're ready." Sally got up without a word and went into the bedroom, taking her suitcase with her. When she returned in her bathrobe, she looked fresher, but I noticed carrying wrinkles and shadows on her face that I hadn't noticed before. She looked at her watch. "Aren't you going to work today?" "What is it?" she asked. "No, I took a week off," I replied. She gave me a shrewd look, linking a lot of things together. We sat in silence for several minutes, studying each other, each reluctant to speak. "Sally, did you know that Randy is married?" I asked. She twitched and her face turned a little paler. We looked at each other a little longer. "What was his name?" I started over. "Your contact is at Lady Cosmetics, right?" "Conrad." "Conrad Jones. I remember you told me once that he was gay. Is that true?" Sally jerked again, took a deep breath. Her eyes were big and tired. She still hadn't said a word. I continued to be silent, the sounds of silence getting louder and louder in the silence of the living room. Finally, I mentally shrugged my shoulders and decided to get it over with. I wasn't expecting this conversation. "Honey," I said, looking at the floor, "I love you. I probably will always love you. But I can only assume that you don't need a marriage, at least with me." Sally sobbed hollowly and started talking, but I just ignored her and kept talking. We discussed what we meant by marriage long before we got serious when we were dating. At the time, I thought I was making a masculine concession to femininity. We agreed that when two people take on a lifelong obligation, it is a contract without an open marriage. Marriage obviously meant that the main part of the promised fidelity, chastity, call it what you will, was withheld. At that time, we reasoned like this. Each partner should be obliged to meet the needs of the other. If this is not happening, we'd agreed that we need to talk. If these needs were considered reasonable, then we believed that the partner who did not fulfill them was unable or unwilling to truly devote himself to marriage. If one partner is unable or unwilling to meet the needs of the other, then it's time to seriously consider whether to stay together. I raised my head and just looked at her, starting to sob. Sally hid her face in her hands. "Vernon, I love you, please. I'm sorry. We can talk, and you can help me, please, Vernon." "Sally, have I satisfied any of your needs? Was I not a good enough husband?" She shook her head, and the tears no longer flowed from my eyes. I tried to ignore them. "Sally, I trusted you completely. Now I wonder how long it took me to wake up, but I'm sure you've been using your trips for adventures for a long time. I'm not asking when it started. I don't need a story. How long you've been cheating doesn't matter now. What matters is that you do it." I couldn't believe what I saw, and I was so doubtful of my suspicions that I decided to prove them false. "Sally, I saw Conrad Jones meet you in Phoenix. I saw you get into the elevator with him. I made those calls that you didn't answer, and I saw him leave the hotel many hours after you went to your room. He looked fresh and as if he had just stepped out of the shower. The next day, you told me that he had never been in your room." Looking at Sally, I could see the tears running down her cheeks. "Sally, I was in the lobby when I called you the night before last, and you said you were very tired and you were going to go straight to bed after dinner at the hotel restaurant. I was in the lobby about 45 minutes later when you came out with Randy. I was standing in the parking lot of the steakhouse while you had dinner with Randy and had a little too much to drink. When you went to the bar, I went in there and watched you dancing and kissing him. One woman pointed out the two of you as a wonderful couple. She said that he picked you up on a previous trip, and it was so wonderful to see two people in love. I was in the cafe when you got into the elevator with him. Everyone who saw you wondered if you had time to enter the room, and many commented loudly and amusingly. I checked Randy's car, found his home number, and called Barbara, his wife. She told me that she was alone at home while he was having lunch and dinner with an important client. I was the one who made those annoying calls when you were having fun with Randy in your room. It was him who threatened to beat my ass for bothering a woman. It was 2 a.m. Sally. Then I just sat and looked at my wife. Her face turned pale, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. Vernon, oh my God, I'm sorry. I do not know why I did it. Please, this will never happen again. You are my husband, you are my love. We built a life together, and that's what I need. Our common life is a real life for me. Somehow I thought it was just a game, and would never become a part of my real life. What can I do to improve? Anything, just tell me. I can't think of anything right now that could restore my faith in you. You are tired, and your curiosity about other people's lips has led to your complete betrayal. You allowed yourself, my most precious being, to belong to another man. I carefully, sometimes it seemed painfully, honestly fulfilled my oath to you and remained exclusively your man. I agree to this and still agree that a man is the property of his wife, just as a woman is the property of a man. I kept my vow. Looking in her eyes, I added, I have to ask Sally. You never hinted that I wasn't good enough in bed or in any other aspect of our life together. I figured it was impossible to satisfy you more than I could, but you brought some new elements to our sex life. It's not bad for me, but now I'm wondering where you got these new techniques from. Was I really not enough for you? Sally sobbed. No, Vernon, never. You're the best lover I've ever had. I'm just tired of being away for so long. Please, honey, what can I do to fix this? Just tell me. I will never do something like this again. It just happened. I love you. I've never loved anyone but you. Sally, I can't offer you anything right now that would make me trust you. Thank heaven we don't have children. I'm going to move in as soon as I find an apartment. Fortunately, we lived on one salary and saved the rest in the bank, so there are no financial problems for us, as well as for you. But now is not the time to discuss the division of our assets. Just for the record, when the time comes, I'd like to split everything in half. I took a deep breath. If you are serious about restoring the marriage, we can keep in touch. And to continue, if you are really serious about preserving our marriage, don't date anyone. I can't make such promises to myself, but you already know that I can hold back. At the moment, the thought of any kind of relationship with anyone makes me cold and repulsive. Your reputation for loyalty is much worse, Sally. I'm going for a walk. I can sleep in the guest room until I find an apartment. Maybe later today we can go to the bank and open separate accounts, at least for savings. But we can discuss the details later if you want. Then I took my coat and left the house for a long walk. I really don't see a way to repair the damage done to our marriage. Some of you will object, but I am interested in hearing your suggestions. This story is about betrayal in a marriage and subsequent attempts to understand the situation. She emphasizes the complexity of family relationships and the importance of open communication to overcome difficulties. Story 2. My wife was 26 and I was 25 years old. Everything was going well with us. We were married for 3 years and had been together for 6 years. The irony was that one of the things that attracted me the most about her was her maturity. She usually carefully analyzed all the big decisions in life, such as choosing college, changing her hairstyle, and most importantly, when she wanted to have children. Her parents taught her to think carefully about everything, but they were never very good at managing money. Her grandmother paid for her college tuition, so in the 3rd year of marriage we had debts for Maya and her education, and she still couldn't find a job in her specialty. The fact that she worked was poorly paid, so the main financial burden lay on me. I noticed that she was feeling unwell, but I didn't know that she was going to make a big decision without discussing it with me. She decided to sell her car and met with a potential buyer on Monday while I was at work. He was very worried and couldn't pick up the car until the weekend, so he paid her the full price in cash. She gave him a notarized contract of sale with a date and signature. However, she continued to use the car, and I did not realize that she had sold it. During dinner, she mentioned that she loves her car very much, and then burst into tears. Then she explained everything to me and added that she had spent half of the money to pay off our bills and debts. I was pretty upset and told her that she probably had to sell the car so we could refund the money to the buyer. Her face fell, but she accepted these facts. She made a mistake selling such a beloved and necessary car, but she had to do it. I was at work on Saturday when my wife said a customer was coming to pick up the car. She didn't answer me while he was there, and it bothered me. I checked the live feed from the surveillance camera in our front yard. I only saw the guy with the cropped hairstyle standing on the drive of the cars, but I turned the record over and saw that the buyer came with the guy with the cropped hairstyle to help him take the cars home. When my wife talked to him, it seemed like she was giving him bad news. He waved his arms and touched his head as if it upset him. When it seemed like he was threatening to sue her, she made him calm down and lean over to her so she could whisper something. She didn't know that the camera doesn't record sound. Instantly, his face softened and he smiled. He looked so surprised and happy at what she said. He looked at the camera when my wife took him by the hand and led him around the house to where we didn't have cameras. The guy with the cropped hairstyle clumsily waited on the drive for a few minutes. While I was already driving home, I was angry when I got there. The men in their car disappeared, but my wife's car remained in place. She greeted me warmly, as if nothing had happened, until she saw the anger in my eyes. I pushed past her into the courtyard, where I scanned our patio furniture for any signs something might have happened. Things looked rearranged, but I didn't find anything. I looked across the yard and noticed that the neighbors had a camera that covered our territory too. I knocked on their door, and after they heard my story, they invited me in and restored the recording for me. They watched a video of me the first time my wife had sex with this guy on the patio, just as I assumed I was heading to my wife, helplessly worrying in the yard. Knowing what I was doing, she understood that our marriage could end when I started showing her the video. She knelt down, not wanting to look at it, and tried to apologize uselessly over and over again, as if it could all disappear. I told her that I hated her for what she had done to me. I started my life with her, taking her past and life upon myself, and was able to provide her with safety and happiness, only for her to end it all by sleeping with someone to repay the debt. It was humiliating and desperate, and she didn't have to do it. I told her to confess her decision and sell the car. She went behind my back and lied more than once. My heart broke. She told me she didn't see any other way out because she needed the car and his money. She then boasted that she had offered him half of his money, but he said that her abilities had fully paid for what she owed. While she was crying and talking about our bills being paid, so I should be happy and forget about everything, I packed my things. I ought to stay with my work colleague. It was awkward and I felt lost. I had to find my packed toothbrush and toothpaste, and rummaging through my duffel bag, I found a pair of my wife's underpants. It made me mourn my loss. She fought me in court, even trying to claim that I was a rapist and that she desperately wanted to fall in love again. It was not at all like what you would expect from a woman telling a judge. Since she couldn't prove anything and had videos of her cheating, she was told to leave the house. I sold it and started my life with a clean slate in another state, where I was offered double my previous salary for the same job. I know that I am lucky, and many victims of infidelity are not so lucky. But I wanted people to know that even when I felt this pain, seeing my wife's clothes mixed with mine, I didn't go back to her. I deserved the opportunity to make true love with someone else, and I found it in my new home in Connecticut. The story highlights the importance of trust, honesty, and respect in relationships. Deception and betrayal can seriously damage close ties. Ending a relationship can be difficult, but it's important to stay true to yourself and your values. Story 3. She started to like me. The good thing was that we were both single, and I was willing to take a chance with her. Since the beginning of my youth, I have always loved smart girls who could overwhelm me with their superbrains, and I believe that my prayers were answered when I met my ex-wife. But I was wrong. We were friends for 7 months before I asked her out. I didn't want to wait any longer for someone else to take her away from me. From the first month of our relationship, I felt that we were made for each other. Months later, the level of influence she had on me became too high, and a lot of things changed in my life. We were the perfect couple, and every day I thanked God for meeting her. Starting from our meeting, I didn't earn much, but I tried to give her something from time to time, even if it wasn't very expensive. I gave her most of these books about business advertising and even one popular book on marketing. There were advertisements everywhere. After 2 years of our acquaintance, she got a good chance. She was offered a job as a business consultant at one of the best companies in our country, which turned our situation around. I worked as a marketer and tried to make big deals. In the first 2 years of my acquaintance with my ex-wife, I made deals that I had not been able to close in 4 years before. And although it wasn't much money, it was a boost for me. Right after that, everything started to take shape for us. I'd become better at marketing, convincing customers and making deals. And she was developing too. We got married after dating for 3 years, and our lives continued to improve. Before we got married again, we agreed not to have children until we reached a certain financial goal, and we did not change this plan. We were driven by achievements at an early age, and I believe that just as famous successful men and women did, we could. During the first 3 years of our marriage, we put in a huge amount of effort, sleepless nights, looked for ideas together, opened a business, and even sacrificed many things to achieve our dreams. The only luxury we had was the food we ate and the apartment we lived in. We had a 2005 model car, and we invested every penny we earned from our jobs in business development. Fortunately, we got the most significant breakthrough in the 4th year of our marriage. Sales have skyrocketed, and even large organizations have found out about us. In our 4th year of marriage, we decided to go on vacation, the first after a little honeymoon. I was so glad and happy because my dreams came true. We were able to move into a bigger and more comfortable apartment, and our business was going well. We increased the number of our remote employees, and everything could be handled even in our absence. The money was steadily coming in, and I was glad that my ex-wife and I could finally live the life we dreamed of. I imagined our vacation to be amazing, full of intimacy and the rebirth of our love, but it revealed to me a very painful truth that I still could not forget. While we were on vacation, my ex-wife continued to participate in online yoga classes. It was an integral part of her that I had to deal with. She was devoted and never missed a class, even when she was sick or ill. On the 3rd day of our vacation, after we left in the morning, we returned to the apartment and rested during the afternoon hours. She said she was going for a walk and asked if I would join her, but since I was still sleepy, I said I would stay and rest. Unfortunately, after she left, I was no longer able to fall asleep and contact her, because she did not take her phone with her. I got bored and decided to play the game on her tablet. I didn't use my phone because I could step aside and spend the whole day working or chatting with my employees. As soon as I started playing, a notification appeared from her yoga instructor. The last message he sent her read, "I love you," and it was decorated with a love emoji, which I found strange. At first I thought that the yoga instructor was just being nice to her, but a desire to learn more woke up in me, so I clicked on the message and their WhatsApp central correspondence opened. When I saw it was there, my heart was breaking. I found messages going back a year, and there were all forms of voice messages. They also exchanged intimate photos of themselves, said dirty things to each other, and sometimes joked about other participants in their yoga classes. I couldn't believe that my ex-wife was cheating on me with her yoga instructor, and she was doing it so cleverly that we were busy with our phones ourselves. I never suspected that something strange was going on. I found out that they always met at different hotels to be together, and each time they shot a video in bed or together in the bathroom. That day, I realized that my ex-wife was not obsessed with yoga, but was obsessed with her yoga instructor. She repeatedly told him that she worships the ground he walks on, and told him things she never told me. According to her reports, he was her spiritual mentor and opened her eyes to the real truth. Reading all these strange things and watching photos and videos of them together destroyed me. Even if I had been told by a psychic that my wife was cheating or would cheat on me, I would not have believed it. I trusted her with everything. Most of all, I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. When I saw enough, I forwarded all the messages, photos and videos to my phone and erased all the traces I had left on her phone. I went back to bed before she returned, but she could see that I was sad about something. She pressured me to find out what happened, and I lied to her that I had lost a big deal and felt terrible about it. 2 days later, pretending to be sick, our vacation was shortened. When we returned, I knew that she would not miss her yoga class the next day, and that was it. An hour after she left in the morning, I surprised her at her class and asked if I could show something on the shared screen in her presence, and her yoga instructor immediately agreed. The first video started playing, and everyone turned to her and her yoga instructor in surprise. I watched my ex-wife standing there, confused and with her eyes full of tears. She tried to get closer to me, but stumbled and left the hall in embarrassment. Her yoga instructor tried to hide his shame, but I also played the recording and everyone saw their messages. It was a big disaster. When I got home, I realized that she had taken some of her things out of our room, and she had left a little note saying, "I'm sorry." And that was the end of our journey. We got divorced and split every penny we earned together. As for her yoga instructor, he was fired, and neither he nor my ex-wife dared to come to this place anymore. I knew I could survive without her, but despite everything we've achieved together, I still hate her for what she's done. She couldn't even meet me to apologize or say anything. She just left a note. We haven't spoken to each other since, and it's been 2 years now, and I'm still struggling with it. It's terrible how good men always end up with underestimating women. This story highlights the importance of honestly discussing mutual expectations and boundaries in a relationship. Betrayal and infidelity cause pain and disappointment, especially when they come from close people we trust. For an optimal response to the detection of betrayal, it is important to remain calm and carefully weigh all the circumstances before taking decisive steps. It is also necessary to remember that the process of forgiveness can take a lot of time and emotional labor. Ultimately, it is important to gain the strength to seek happiness and healthy relationships in the future, even after hardships and disappointments in the past.